Good morning. Madness reminds me of the way I was introduced at DevOps Days in Portland 2 years ago. That was madness. So, good morning. Who's already sober? Okay, there's 2 people who are sober. Who's awake? There's 5 people who are awake. Okay, that's... Okay. So the title of this talk is, Can we fix DevOps? Or maybe, can we fix oops developers? Because I don't think we fixed the problem yet. It's been 10 years and the problem is still there. So, who am I? Can I walk offside this thing? Because I'm going to fall off if I don't. Cameraman is not nodding at me, so it's fine. So, who am I? I'm Kris. About 10 years ago, I had this crazy idea together with Patrick DeBart, like I told you guys yesterday, to bring together a group of developers and operations, 60, 70 of our best friends. John was there. Was there anybody else here who was there? Toshan wasn't there, but... No, John was there, a couple of other people were there, and one thing led to another, and we started a DevOps movement. And I was doing that because I was talking at a lot of conferences about open source, about large-scale deployments, because I started out my career as a Java, Perl, PHP developer, but I eventually ended up being the operations guy because I knew how to cluster things, I knew how to rack things, I knew how to do things, and doing that all with open source technology. My day job today is I help organizations, both on technical level and organizational level, to adopt this thing, which we now call DevOps. But basically what I'm trying to do is help them achieve a better way of delivering software. I do run a couple of other conferences, like Config Management Camp, Load Days, together with Toshan, was in the back, and was going to talk today. And for some reason, people shout at me on Twitter when they run into DNS problems. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. And everybody has been giving their definition of DevOps today and yesterday. And this is actually my definition. To me, DevOps is a global movement to improve the quality of software delivery, which we founded in Ghent back in 2009. And it started on the crossroads of open source, early cloud adoption, and Agile. And I'll come back to that. And to me, in a transformation story, those are the 3 key ingredients I need to see before I can actually go into an organization and say, if you have the seeds of these things, then there's potential for success. And my experience over the past 10 years is if there's none of this, don't even bother. And those 10 years, we started out in Ghent, like we've been saying already for the 10th time today. But John took DevOps Days to the US. Lindsay Holmuth, who we usually forget to mention, took DevOps Days to Australia. What most people forget is that we had an event in Sao Paulo the very second year. And then things started growing. We had one event a year in Europe the first couple of years. Hamburg, Göteborg, and then Rome. And Rome was actually the last event in Europe that it was the original team that ran it. And then after that, new events started popping up. We had 2 in London the year after in 2013. We had Amsterdam showing up. We had, I think, Berlin also, and a couple of others. And since then, things have exploded. Dan just said 100 events a year. I don't know where he gets the numbers, but according to the GitHub repository, there's like 40 in 2019. We got 700 people organizing this on the global Slack channels. And we are heading towards our 20th anniversary in Ghent, but later about that later. And next to actual DevOps Days, there are also other community events who add a dedicated track about DevOps to their event. So let's take a step back and look at history. And a lot of people, when they look at my face, they think, what's this guy? That's grumpy, old, frustrated dude, and he never smiles. And I'm sorry, that's just how I've been made by my parents. So that's what my face looks like. I can't help that. And some of them say, well, he's really opinionated. I call it experienced. But what I really want to do is talk about these things because we need to learn from history, and we know that history repeats. And we need to learn from the mistakes we make. We need to teach people why we started doing infrastructure as code, because we wanted to prevent image sprawl. And then all of them go like, what's image sprawl? Well, if you got 3,000 different containers in production, you'll figure that out. And still they say, nah, whatever. I'm just gonna click them one-on-one together. So what I'm gonna do is take a journey back and go with you over what I've seen change in not only the topics of DevOps days, but also the topics at the open spaces, because that's what the people really cared about. And there was a period like 3-4 years ago when I could actually predict 90% of the open space discussion that was going on. And sometimes we knew it, because if Anton stood up, it was going to be Terraform.
It's still so.
It's still so, yeah. But there were a couple of people where you knew if they were going to propose a topic, it was going to be that topic. But, well. So if we look at the very early days, it's going to be on the left-hand side. And more recently, it's going to be on the right-hand side. So we started talking about what Agile is really about. How do you do Agile? And that has shifted to, well, people are doing fake Agile. People don't understand what Agile is really about. Rather than explaining people the difference between Kanban and Scrum, we now talk and we hear people saying, well, we're doing safe. And we say, that's not Agile. And if we look at the early days, we had startups who were coming to talk about their experiences, about their examples. And apart from Sasha yesterday, it's been a long time that I've been to a DevOps day where there was a success story being told. I've seen it shift from small and mid-sized and larger organizations talking about their success stories to, and people look at me maybe as a vendor, but I'm not a vendor because we don't sell a product, to vendors coming in and telling stories about culture and how they're doing things, but not really success stories on how people actually changed the way they delivered software. We moved from success stories to some events where I listen to the audience and I listen to the people and I hear them actually explain the anti-patterns and how they are doing things that are setting them up completely for failure. The early days was the unicorns, like the one-offs, the Spotifys, the Etsy's. And we don't see those anymore. Where have they gone? They still exist. Poster childs have gone, but now we see topics about how do we get management involved? We've been failing. How do you deal with failure? And even sadly, more often, we've even seen so many talks about burnout. Because that's present in our community, it's present in our culture. And it's a completely different topic from 10 years ago. This is about culture. So you know where I'm going. If we talked about automation, 10 years ago we were talking CF Engine, Puppet, Chef, all of those things, like how do we do this? And the discussion now has moved to, we're all YAML engineers. Who's a YAML engineer? Do you like it? We had orchestration tools where we said we have a difference between infrastructure as code and orchestration. And now it's YAML. We were talking about CI/CD and using tools there, and luckily there's been much more tools now. It's not just Hudson anymore, it's not just Jenkins, there's a bunch of others. But the things that have changed in the worst direction is, I remember, and John was there, the very first DevOps days, we had an open space where we had a huge paper on the floor, and we were comparing different tools in the cloud era. Like, what is OpenStack compared to CloudStack and Eucalyptus and OpenNebula and OpenQRMM? What does it do different and how do we use them? And that was in-depth technical discussion. And these days, just, yeah, we use EC2. Our freedom disappeared. We just used EC2 and maybe the other ones, but mostly. And we had discussions back then on hypervisors versus hypervisors. And Mitchell showed up and brought us Vagrant and said, hey, I've got this tool here and you can do things and it works. And we were talking about the in-depth of Linux HA and how you really build high available solutions. And we were actually talking, and luckily this came back slowly, but maybe not in a good direction. We were talking about how file systems worked, and we were people explaining how file systems worked. Yesterday in the open space, we had topics on how the file systems work, on how the RBD worked. But that was in the context of, well, if you take that feature from AWS, you basically go back 10 years and you're back to where the RBD was. And today the discussions are like, we don't talk anymore about the variety of virtualization. We just said Docker, 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 Docker. And maybe Podman and Cryo now, so it's starting to evolve. And giving the developers the same platform that Mitchell provided us, where they could have local development environments, now it's just Docker, Docker, Docker. It's almost getting a monoculture. And if we're talking about orchestration and how to move those workloads around, 10 years ago, I was not talking about OpenMosix anymore, but Mesos and Kyiv, they're pretty much doing exactly the same that we were doing early 2000s with process migration, but on a much more complex level. And on a storage level, well, we still haven't solved the problem. I stopped counting the number of enterprises that use NFS from within a container, because that's their solution. So are we heading forward? I'm afraid we're not. More automation. Well, we did move forward. We moved from no testing and the early bits of testing to actually testing a lot more and adding security testing to our pipelines. And even though I'm not a big fan of the DevSecOps word, because we've been including security since the early days. I think it was Frank Beredek in Amsterdam who said the S in DevOps stands for the security part. If you take HTTP and you want to secure it, it's HTTPS. If you take DevOps and you secure it, it's DevOps. And we were improving on the other side too, because people were, in the early days, just taking Git and using it as if it was Subversion, with a huge amount of tags and all those things. And now, luckily, we learned that if you want to shoot yourself in the foot, keep branching and keep doing those things. And if you really want to move forward, don't branch, trunk-based development. So that's a whole thing of automation things that have changed, but not for the better. On the monitoring part, we have improved. We moved from John Vincent tweeting and blogging about monitoring sucks, because we hated monitoring. There was an awkward set of tools that were not lining up to what we wanted. We were constantly getting things out of sync. Tools like RRD and Cacti, which you needed to have, specifically Cacti, you needed to have a DBA if you had a scalable environment, and Zabbix too. And we really hated monitoring. And we moved towards a newfound love for monitoring. I remember Ulf Manson, who was talking in Rome, and he had love heart pictures drawn by his kids, and he was doing Ignite on how he found his love for monitoring again. He found a new tool, Sensu. But the real part where he started loving monitoring was because he had added automation to the picture. He wasn't doing anything manual anymore. His monitoring config with those new era of tools was in place when he deployed things. He was not thinking afterwards anymore. It was part of his stack. And then we got Prometheus. And there's nothing wrong with permissions apart from the topic I'll come back to later. This is where we are just cargo culting tools. Docker, Prometheus. Everybody wants to use it. Everybody is playing with this tool. Michael Doogie did an Ignite at DevOps Days Amsterdam some years ago with only this slide 20 times. And so many people have been trying to say that this tooling hype will not fix your broken culture. Containers will not fix our broken culture. Prometheus will not fix your broken monitoring. Because people try to take the easy way out. They're not going to listen to when you have a really complex answer. They're going to say, hey, wait, this looks easy. We're going to jump on this tool and we're going to do this. Because, like we heard yesterday, changing culture is something you can die on the hill once, but twice, and then you stop doing it. It's why people burn out, because it doesn't work. It's really, really hard. It does work, but it's really, really hard. So we have vendors who come in and sell us this DevOps thing. They sell a product, and all the customers go like, yeah, we want this product. But they actually cannot sell it. It doesn't work. Ken Mugrage says, well, you cannot buy DevOps, but you need to have to sell it. And what the vendors are doing is selling a tool. Just like the security people have been doing for years. Here's this tool. If you buy this, you're going to be secure. Here's this tool. If you buy this, you're going to be DevOps. It doesn't work like that. So this is hard. We see that, I made a typo on this one, and we see that it's really hard to figure out what's going on. Why are we wrong? What isn't helping us forward? And I think it's because the IT industry is basically really awesome at breaking things. And taking good things and breaking them apart. Who likes Agile? John, don't you like it anymore? I used to look at it as a really good library of best practices. But that's not what most organizations look at it. They look at it as, whoa, you're not going to get anything into production. We're going to have change management boards at 10 a.m. in the morning on a Friday every 3 weeks. And we're going to say no. Whereas if you really look at what their goal is, it's about reducing risk. It's about making sure that your uptime is okay. And if you look at that from a DevOps mindset, if you can automate that, and if you can move that much earlier in the process, and if you can constantly do it rather than just Friday morning, it's the same goal. But the people that have been doing this for so long, they forgot about those goals. They just said, well, this is the procedure, we're going to do the procedure. And if you do this 10,000 times the same speed, then we're going somewhere. But it died because of people not understanding the goal. Is Agile dead? Who's seen real Agile? Some people have seen real Agile. Most large organizations you walk into have never seen Agile, even though they claim they're Agile. They're doing something which is waterfall, but they have sprints and stand-ups and Jira. But they have upfront decided that within the next 6 months we're going to do this, and developers had nothing to say within it. It's nothing to do with Agile. They have the scaled Agile framework, which is basically waterfall in disguise. Keeps the managers happy, because nothing really changes. And the developers and the ops people get stand-ups and 2 weekly sprints. And even then, it's process over people, because the Agile coaches come in and say, you need to have a stand-up at 10 o'clock in the morning, you need to have all of these and these ceremonies in place. And the worst thing is they even ask, what does Agile mean? Is that an abbreviation of something? And you're like, wait, what happens? Luckily, there's new movements popping up and explaining Agile again. Is open source dead? Yep. I don't think open source is dead, but we see a lot more discussion about, is this really open? Is there actually a community using these tools? Is this open core, where the real interesting functionality is hidden off from the users? Like, hey, you got a search engine, but if you want authentication and authorization, you're going to pay for it. And now some other big vendor pops up and here's the code, fuck off. And then they go, hey, they're killing open source. No, who's the bad guy here? The one who was hiding all the juicy bits, or the one who says, we've contributed it to the community? I don't know. Or you have, and I give OpenStack as an example, but the Kyiv community is heading the exactly same direction. You get huge corporates we were investing tons of money into marketing and discussions, and not into code, and not into usability. To me, the tipping point was when I was at FOSDEM at an OpenStack board meeting, and the first 20 minutes of that meeting, they were actually discussing where they were going to spend the 1 or 2 million funding they had and where the next conference was going to be so they could throw a party. I'm like, this is not what open source is about. This is a marketing scam. This is just people trying to sell us something. And we killed DevOps. So who killed DevOps? He was raising his hand already. I mean, we did. We were fighting over tools like, what do you want to do, Chef or Puppet? Which one is the best? And I was the one in the back saying, that doesn't matter, just use one. Just do things manually. But I was the one who was going around the world and giving a talk, 7 tools for your DevOps stack. Because that was the talk people wanted to hear, and they kept asking me to come back and give that tool. Like, I was fed up with it, but it was the one. And the problem with that talk is it was about 7 tools, and the 8th tool, which was the better part of my presentation, was about it's about humans. And that's the part everybody forgot because they came back to, yeah, so we're using this. But no, that was not a talk. The talk was basically about the human being. And there were people who were saying, Docker is the ultimate DevOps tool. Wait, what? Whoa. And then there were people who were implementing all the tools. I gave talks about open source monitoring and the landscape that were around. And the year after, some dude comes up and be like, we implemented all of them. It's like, no. And our good friends, the recruiters. Who's a DevOps engineer? Who's proud of it? Are you a developer? Are you an operations person? What are you doing? And each time some recruiter calls me and says, I need a DevOps engineer, I'm like, so what do you need? They don't know. 2 years ago at Low Days, some of the speakers came up and they started, well, my pimp tells me I'm a DevOps engineer. Like, okay, yeah, maybe that's the best thing. It's not your fault. Ken again figured out at some point, like, this is probably the best job advertisement for a DevOps engineer. The salary is 0 because it's not a job. So we put those DevOps engineers in DevOps teams. That's the silo in the middle. Reducing handover, we add another step. And this is actually a simplified picture, because I've walked into organizations where there was not only a DevOps team, but there was a release management team, and there was... and they were thinking they were adopting DevOps. But it got worse. Somewhere about 5 years ago, people started thinking they could get certified. Who's certified? Who's a certified DevOps engineer? You have this one, right? John has that one too. So the joke is actually that the folks over at DevOps Days Berlin were handing out fake certificates about a month before DevOps Days Ghent 5 years ago started handing them out. And it really is about, this is a master in DevOps by the University of Dev and oops. But still people sell those certifications, other people buy those certifications, and there's HR environments who think that, pardon my French, they can hire people who are certified not to be an asshole. I don't get it. I do get it. I mean, ITIL certification completely missed the goal. Everybody who was ITIL certified was like, I know the full procedure, I'm going to do it like this. Every Scrum certified master I ran into had this certification hanging up next to his Prince2 certification and didn't understand Agile. And then there's the tooling certification where, well, with a little couple of exceptions, Most tooling certifications are just another revenue flow from a vendor. Hey, well, we're selling this product, they got renewals, how can we get more money from the people that use it? Oh, we're going to get them certified, and then they need to renew this, not only the license, but the certification in a couple of years. Oh, and by the way, the efforts to standardize DevOps, yeah, good luck. So certification, marketing and sales people, all of those, like, that's not what we started, that's not what we were trying to do. But it's really hard. They've been selling DevOps to everybody. And if you walk into an organization and they want to do the change and you explain them, well, this is what you really need to do, they go like, nah, we don't like that, we're going to find the next one. And then somebody else comes in and says, well, this is what you need to do. Nah, we're going to choose the next one. Like shopping for a car. And they pick the one that's the easiest or the cheapest, but not the one that's actually going to help them forward. So somewhere around 2013, 14, people started saying that there's this different thing. There's enterprise DevOps, which is going to be totally different from what DevOps is about. Because, well, all the things you've been doing, that only works in small organizations. It's never going to work in the enterprise. Well, I got news for you. I was working in a telco manufacturer when we started DevOps Days, and Patrick was working for government agencies. We were not working for startups. And we had cross-functional teams that were end-to-end responsible in 2007 and 2008 that were building things and releasing things at a high cadence. And then, well, you cannot change those large organizations. Well, there might be some truth to that. Or you need to do things completely different. But the thing is, you can change those large organizations. It's not going to be that visible. I spent 3.5 years in a large Dutch orange financial institution. And there's been numerous cases about that. And they're not the perfect example. They're not the holy grail of what DevOps is supposed to be. But they were on a journey. And they started that journey with a couple of teams, with some changes left and right, and they started improving. And it took them a long time to improve. And they're still improving. But they're moving things. And that's what's important. They are improving what they are doing. And because it's a much larger organization, it's going to take much more time to tell everybody, this is what we're going to do. If you need to talk to 100 people, you can put them in one room, and you can say, hey, this is what we're going to do. If you need to talk to 5,000 people, try finding a room to put them in. So you need to do that over and over and over again. And by the time you've reached half of them, some of them might have left. Michael Brunton-Spalbu still is at GDS, I think, told me a story that at some point, if you compare a transition to the human body, and you keep shooting at the human body with bacteria, at some point, the body's going to say, hey, it's enough. The antibodies kicking, they fix and they start rejecting change. And that happens in large organizations. So it's going to take a while. And the ones that are successful are the ones who can say, well, we know we're not there yet, but we're trying. The ones that are not successful are the ones who say, we're doing DevOps. We're Agile. Because typically that's something that's wrong there. Those are the ones that are internally saying, we're doing this thing, but no one is actually doing it. Those are the ones where people are trying to do the right thing, but there's so many people still blocking the change that they end up in burnout. And that's painful. A lot has to do with communication within large organizations. Nigel Kirsten from Puppet has a really good talk on, are we hypocrites? Are we lying about ourselves? Are we lying about DevOps? And one of the slides he has is the vision that executives have, as opposed to the vision that middle management has, as opposed to the people on the floor. And studying how that message from, well, the build is broken, which means we have 5,000 tests failing, to one layer up, yeah, there's a build which is failing, to all the way up, well, there's like this one small build which is failing, but everything is fine. It's the same message, but it's completely changed. And then there's the organizations where people have been basically taught to lie to their bosses for the past 10 years, because you cannot bring bad news. And we need to change that. We need to get people into places where they're comfortable enough to tell their boss, well, it's broken, it doesn't work. And that's hard. So when you start trying to do these things, when you start trying to fix enterprise DevOps, the first thing I tell people is don't call it DevOps. Call it engineering 2.0, call it continuous improvement, call it whatever. Because the moment you call it a DevOps transition, people go like discussing the terminology. And they'll try to figure out their version of DevOps. And there's vendors who are going to come in and say, hey, do you want this DevOps tool? Yeah, but no, we're not doing a DevOps transition. We're just trying to move further. And you're going to waste more time into trying to fix people's broken definitions rather than explaining what your actual goals are. And that's the important part. Setting out the goals to the people, like, what are we really going to try to do here? Don't call it Spotify. The number of organizations you walk into, yeah, we're doing Spotify. Okay, what does that mean? It means you have highly functional teams that are self-supporting and that are now trying to fix the way to have intercommunication between the teams. No. Well, that's the snapshot where Spotify was when they documented the model. So you have to have those prerequisites in place before you can actually move to that model. And you have random teams that have no ownership, you don't know how to deploy things, so you're not even close to even thinking about solving that problem. And I'm pretty sure that there's going to be consultants out there. Today already, we're going to sell organizations to become SRE-driven. Hype-driven development. Resume-driven development. And then there's this one. There's a huge difference in adopting tools and adopting mindsets between a Silicon Valley-based startup which has either as goal to be an acqui-hire and be gone in 6 months, or be sold to a VC, and that's basically their customers, the VC. They don't have real customers in a lot of cases. They're thinking about the exit strategy. So whatever they build doesn't need to be around for 6 to 9 years. 6 to 9 months is enough. And then on the other side, there's building an actual business, where there's actual customers, where there's actual people using a product, and where you need to think about paying the bills at the end of the month without external money from customers. And it's a totally different ballgame, and people forget that. The thing is, we see youngsters pop up and they say, hey, well, I can do this. I'm just going to Terraform 5 lines and spin up some Amazon thingies, and everything's going to be fine. And then 3 weeks later, you walk in and you're like, you know the world can read your S3 data? What do you mean? Security. Yeah, these buckets, why are there no authentication? Why is it wide open? What do you mean? YOLO. So, 9.5 years later, since we started DevOps Days, we moved from, I used to have a slide which was actually a story, a true story I had when I was working at a telco provider, where I was sitting in the operations team, and on Friday evening, there's this marketing lady who comes up and says, I just mailed you a tarball. Can you put that in production? That's a new marketing campaign. It's going to be live on national radio at 5 o'clock. And it was somewhere 3 to 4 in the afternoon. It's like, wait, we don't have servers for this. We don't have where you're going to put users backup. We cannot scale this. And that was part of the DevOps problem. somebody had built something and we didn't know how to deploy it. There was no communication, there was no collaboration between the business and development. And that was part of the problem we were trying to fix, like get everybody on the same boat, get everybody involved so we can try to prevent this. And we didn't. Because exactly the same happened a couple of years later when I was working at a customer. Actually, it was the day after our keynote at Mezelskal in Amsterdam. And I was sitting there on the engineering team where everybody was working towards building their automated CI pipeline, and we could basically spin up their Java instance in a couple of seconds. It was fully puppetized with monitoring and metrics and everything in place, and the pipelines were slowly moving toward pipeline as code. And there's this marketing person who walks in and says, here's a container, can you put this in production? Nope. Can I spin up my kube stack? We don't have any provisioning around for containers. How do we deal with images? How do we monitor this? Do we need backups? How did you even build this? Yeah, here's a Docker file. No, that doesn't even parse. Security. I didn't think of it. And this is exactly the same problem as 10 years ago. Only the terminology changed. It's a container now, it's not a tarball. But all the non-functional topics we're discussing are exactly the same. Oops. We've been trying to do this for 10 years. It's not easy. We still need to continue teaching people not to shoot themselves in the foot. And sometimes the only way to teach people to not do this is by letting themselves. Is by letting themselves hurt so they realize what the pain is really about. You want to see what image sprawl is about? Fine. Keep pulling in random containers from the internet with Alpine and wait till somebody actually guesses the root password. Oh wait, that just happened last week, didn't it? It's going to be a long journey, and we're nowhere to be finished. Most large organizations have understood that. I mean, 2 to 5 year journeys are not uncommon. And in those journeys, we often see waves of people. Like the first wave is the ones who say, hey, we need change. We want to do things completely different. And they start from in the organization trying to fix things. And they keep trying and they keep trying and they fail. And they get burned out and they leave. And then the second wave is where management realizes, well, maybe those folks were right. Maybe we should try doing this. We're going to get new people on board. We're going to tell them we're going to change and then do a little bit. And those new people try things and say, well, you told me you were going to do this, but you're not actually doing this, so this is not my place. I'm going to leave. One of the hardest part as a DevOps consultant is you're never going to see what you think is DevOps because you're always coming into organizations that don't have it yet and you need to help them. So you're always going to see the worst things around. So burnout and being fired, if you are standing up and trying to introduce those changes, is not uncommon. I think about 75% of the CIOs I worked with over the past 5 years either left or got fired from their jobs because they were sticking out, they were trying something. It's a high contrast with what I hear at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in the US, where Gene basically said everybody got promoted. I pointed them to a couple of my friends who got fired. Never got feedback. The journey is going to continue. I mean, those organizations that are small now, that are doing what we think is good collaboration and working together and having small teams, they're going to grow. And they're going to come up to the point where, wait, we're not the 17 people team anymore. We're suddenly 100 people and communication is getting harder. And how do we do this? And they are going to figure out, hey, what if we put in a dedicated operations team? And what if we do a release management team? And they're going to run into all the traps which we know they're going to run into. And that's the first problem. And then the second problem is there are going to be new technologies. Docker, Kube. And people are going to randomly jump on those and say, hey, it's good for my resume that I know these new fancy tools. And they're going to completely ignore everything we learned in the past 20 years. All the good practices regarding system administration and software development. New fancy tool, jump, play. Oh, wait, now we need to get it to production. And we need to fix that. So, for a lot of us, the role we have is not going to be a software developer. It's not going to be a system administration. It's not going to be a security person. It's going to be a teacher. Explaining to people who are new in our team or new in this industry what we have learned over the past, well, for me, 2.5 decades, for John a bit more, for some others, only 10 years. And while we do that, we still need to keep looking at new tools. How do we do container orchestration an easy, smart way? It might not be Kyiv. It could be Nomad. Maybe we don't need containers because, well, we don't have microservices in this organization. Maybe we just have a simple LAMP stack. Maybe we need observability. Or maybe just good log files. Because complexity is not the same always. So we need to become experts in learning again, in studying what's happening. We might need to become a math expert to figure out what metrics really mean, rather than, hey, that's a nice fancy graph, what's this? We need to become shrinks, because our colleagues are going to be depressed and nearing burnouts, and we need to figure out how to deal with those. But most of all, we're going to be needing to build bridges between all the different skills and figuring out how those people, developers and operations and business and marketing and security and sales and all those people can work together and understand each other. And while we do that, we need to do this. We need to realize that every 18 months it's going to be different. We need to realize that everything is going to change, except for this. It always is going to be about the people. The tools are going to change, but the people are not. But it's time to stand up against a couple of things. We need to fix hype-driven development. We need to fix resume-driven development. We need to fix awesome but completely non-fitting tools. And we need to fix people starting to put DevOps in front of every word. And that's going to be a really big challenge. I think DevOps is here to stay. We're having the 10th-year anniversary. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, apart from new tools, new challenges, new people. But we're going to have to keep collaborating and working together on all of those topics. And that is what really is going to change. So it's not too late to fix this. And if you want to join that discussion, come to Ghent, where we're going to have a big party, and we're going to figure out what we did wrong over the past 10 years, so we can fix it. How much time do we have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. John.
Yeah, just wait. Well, hold on. Hold on, man. I know you got a big voice, but I'm going to come over and do this right.
Goes without saying, that was an awesome presentation. But your point about history is, I think, the most. And I remember in 2009, Velocity, before DevOps was coined, I had John Allspaw on the left of me and John Adams, who ran Twitter. And I looked to my left and right, and they were both running MATLAB. So your thing about math, you know, like we've come full circle. The two guys that ran like two of the early successful pre-DevOps infrastructures, they were managing their system with MATLAB. So to your point, math, I think it's awesome.
Mathematics.
Something to do with time. And time zone.
Also, that's not a question, that's just a short question to the audience. Please raise your hand. People who are using Chef, Puppet, and Ansible at the same project at the same time. This is great. This is great.
All four
You
of them
see
or
this?
just two of them?
All three of them.
All three of them.
Right. At the same time.
Two out of 5,
And
yeah.
Terraform.
The Terraform, Puppet, Ansible, yeah. Terraform, Chef, Ansible, whatever, yeah, sure. But Puppet, Ansible, Chef, all of them?
What a great times we live in.
What a brilliant age.
Yeah, chaos engineering. We didn't talk about chaos engineering yet.
Got time for one more? Not really, but here we go.
Hey, so we're just starting out to do serverless, so like none of this matters to us anymore, right?
Nah, just figure it out yourself. You know that gun? Yeah. You need to trigger it once before you feel how painful it is.
All right, thank you very much, Kris. Big round of applause, everybody.